That's a lot better. How many student athletes do we have in the room this morning? Raise your hand. We'll make sure. Okay, I can barely see you because of these lights. Why is it so dark in here? It's like a club. What's up with that? All right. My name's Emmett Gill, and I'm here to talk about who dropped the ball, an institutional analysis of the Baylor rape scandal. This is a paper that one of my former students, actually she was a student here at UT, and I put together. She's moving on to a PhD at the University of Texas. So let me get started. A lot of you already know about the Baylor rape, sexual assault controversy. Baylor's a private university, $1.2 billion endowment, $6 million a year spent on athletics, and it's 58% female. When all this started to go down with regard to our public knowledge of what was going on at Baylor with regard to sexual assault, it was only about 4 years past the murder by Carlton Dotson of Reginald Dennehy and the shutdown of the basketball program and the cover-up of everything by basketball coach Dave Bliss. And so I think that's sort of important to contextualize that Baylor had a history of covering things up. So I want to set the stage for you right quick. I don't do a lot of text. I want you to think about this. What this symbol means. It refers to decoupling. So the framework for this starts with decoupling, which refers to when rules are bent or broken or negotiated to maintain optimal efficiency. The second piece of this framework concept is legitimacy, or the cultural and societal support for acceptance of an organization. In other words, sometimes athletic departments do things despite rules being broken to maintain acceptance of their athletic program or particular team. And then we talk about this notion of isomorphism or institutional isomorphism. And basically when we talk about that, it means that institutions within a university begin to adopt similar practices. In order to be accepted, they become homogeneous. So if something's going on in athletics, the university or student services or the Title IX office begins to accept that as legitimate because they want to maintain that legitimacy. They understand that decoupling has happened. But all of this falls under the institutional logic of the university. And we know at Baylor, it being a private, highly religious university that frowns on things like sexual intercourse before marriage, that the institutional logics and somehow affected what was going on in athletics. So I want to give you a quick timeline. And this is not a directed reading class. So I'm going to leave this up here and let you look at it, and I'm going to hit some of the points. In 2004, the Dear Colleague letter requiring universities to hire a Title IX coordinator was released. In April of 2012, Tevin Elliott was charged with sexual assault of a fellow Baylor student, Jasmine Hernandez, and he was suspended indefinitely from the football team. In November of 2014, Patty Crawford, and excuse me for that typo, was hired as Baylor's first full-time Title IX coordinator. And then in early 2015, the new title office first hears about an alleged gang rape of a female student athlete by 5 players in 2012. We know that following, Baylor hires Pepper Hamilton to conduct an internal investigation. In May of 2016, President Starr was demoted, Art Browse was fired, Ian McCall was also fired. In 2016, a total of 4 Title IX lawsuits were filed against Baylor by 10 victims. And on November 8th of 2016, the NCAA announces it will not place any sanctions on Baylor. The methodology for this study was a critical case study or critical case analysis. It included a sample size of 78. Ladies and gentlemen, what I try and do with some of the research that I conduct is utilize media content, because oftentimes we don't have access to this information. So when we're talking about sexual assault, that's not oftentimes something that we can go on campus and ask people about and they're going to be forthright. And so in order to tell this story, we put together a critical case study using 78 stories, engaged in techniques, qualitative techniques, including pattern matching, peer debriefing, and other techniques to make sure that the themes that we uncovered were consistent with the story that we wanted to tell. And so basically, what we found in this study is that, the institutional logics of, well, let me back up, because I want to get away from this presentation and talk to the student athletes in here. What we found is that there were over 19 instances of decoupling or rule breaking. In other words, there were 19 instances where Baylor was aware that student athletes had engaged in sexual assault, and they looked over it. They looked over it. They created what we call a mock bureaucracy. In other words, when something happened, they would go to Art Briles, they would go to the athletic director, instead of going to the Title IX office, instead of going to the Waco police, they kept it internal. They created a mock bureaucracy. And the institution went along with this. Institutional isomorphism. The institution, Baylor University, adopted the values of the athletic department, which was essentially to cover this up. Now, I want to talk to the black athletes in here. I don't know how much you know about Baylor, but we've heard throughout this conference that upwards of 85, 80%, 90% of our student athletes on our football team are black. They're black. 85% of the females at Baylor ain't black. You feel me? Tell me if you feel me. You feel me? And so the thing that I'm trying to sort of promote within a research study is understand, to my black male in particular athletes out there, that when a university decides to decouple, when they decide to break the rules and you go along with that, you think you're getting over, that only happens within a university setting. When you get out in the real world, there is no decoupling. There is no institutional isomorphism. The logics are different. Tevin Elliott right now is in jail for 20 years. And other Baylor former student athletes will also be spending some time behind bars. And so what we found in this study is that the decoupling, the 19 instances, the isomorphism, the institution taking on the values of the athletic department, led to this cover-up. And Baylor tried to, and a part of this study was looking at this notion of legitimacy. Baylor tried to become more legitimate. They hired Patty Crawford. But in fact, what they did with Ms. Crawford was they did not give her the resources that she needed. They had still created a mock bureaucracy. You got to understand, ladies and gentlemen, you have women time and time again. I mean, we know now of at least 19 cases of sexual assault, 4 Title IX suits. Women time and time and again who weren't going to the Waco police, who weren't going to the Title IX office, they were going to the athletic department. What kind of nonsense is that? But also this thing with these athletes, and I can't sit up here and lie to you and say that all of these athletes in these 19 instances were black, but I think a few of them were. That time and time again that they were engaging in this behavior. And so what we have at the conclusion of this study is that we have a university, and working for an athletic department in a university, it's difficult for me to sit up here and say this and be critical of a peer. But 2 instances, one with Reginald Danahy and Carlton Dotson in a murder, and another with over 19 sexual assaults at Baylor University, that Baylor actually covered up these things, and the university was complicit in doing this. Very excited about this research, very excited about what my colleagues up here said, because we really do have to do something about this. And I think the key as I close, to my brothers, your athletes out there, y'all have to do something about this. We can research this till the cows come home. But until y'all step up and redefine yourself as men and be willing to put your hand on the shoulder of your other brothers and let them know that this is wrong, it starts with the language, it starts with the music, it starts with the culture, that it's not going to end. It doesn't make any difference that it costs $160,000 to incarcerate a man and only $12,000 to educate him. They're going to keep putting y'all in jail. Understand that. That when you get out in the real world, the logic's change. The institution is different. Let's change the game. Let's do the right thing. Thank you so much for your